Hi there, welcome to this build of a 40-inch wingspan Speedy Bee. Now this is a design from Clancy Aviation that appeared in RCM magazine, and you can now download the plans from the Outer Zone website, and I'll include a link in the description below this video. Now in the last video we got the basic structure of the fuselage sticked up, and now we need to start thinking about what we're going to do next to continue building this up and giving it a little bit more strength and rigidity. Now the main things I want to get done today is the sheeting on this underside. That's going to give it a lot more rigidity. Now on the underside here it's 1/16, is actually set in between the longer runs, so that'll be interesting, cutting that, getting that accurate. And then on the nose section here, on the underside of the nose, we've got some 1/16, two pieces of laminated there. So both of those are going to give this quite a lot of strength. But before we do that, I need to think about the axle for the wheels. It's going to go in this slot here, and the creation or the building of an axle box so that the dirt and muck from around the axle and the wheels doesn't get fed into the fuselage. So we need some kind of box section going through there. And traditionally, Lazy Bees, Speedy Bees, they have some kind of suspension. Traditionally it was elastic bands, but more recently people have been using shock absorbers from RC cars, and that's what I'm going to be using. I've got a couple of nice little shock absorbers. So the first thing I need to do is getting that suspension and axle box sorted out, because I don't want to do the sheeting and then realise I've lost access and it's difficult to get in here and I have to come in from the top, because that will make life really difficult. So I'm going to start thinking about the axle I'm going to use, the wheels, the suspension, and we'll come back and have a look at the solution that I've worked out once I've worked it out. Right, well I've come up with a plan of how I'm going to do the axle and the axle box. So take a look at this and I'll show you what I'm going to do. Right, well, these slots are where the channel needs to go through the fuselage to carry the axle. And the axle on the plans, it suggests using this size music wire, which is just under 2.5 mil, which is actually really flexible. I don't like the idea of using. So I'm going to be using some 3 mil music wire, which is just a little bit more resilient, a little bit stronger, and it will add a little bit of extra weight, but it won't, not a great deal. Now to construct this channel for the axle to run in, I'm going to be using a piece of 1 mil plywood. I'm going to put on a couple of pieces of 3/16 balsa, hard balsa, and I'm going to epoxy the inside of that, essentially fuel proof it to waterproof it. I'm then going to do the same with the inside surface of another piece, which will then go on like that to form the channel. Now this will then, after being cut to size, will just slot into that, and there we have our axle channel going through the fuselage. Now I'm going to put on the outside edge here just a little bit of 1 mil ply that will give a little bit of resistance or strength, resilience, strength to the outside surface here, because when the axle comes through there's going to be probably a washer, a stopper, and then a wheel or something like that. So there'll be a little bit of rubbing on that, and just having that piece of plywood there will just give it a little bit more resistance to wear. So I'm going to get on now and make up this axle box and get that glued into place, and then we'll have a look at how we're going to do the axle. Right, well I've got the one side of the box made up, and I've got some epoxy that has just been thinned down a little bit with some 95% ethanol, and I'm just brushing this in here nice and thinly, which will just give it a bit of a waterproofing and fuel proofing. Right, well, I've now got the channel in place, glued in place, and I haven't put on these pieces of 1mm ply yet on the outside. I'm going to leave that until I've got the sheeting done, because these stick below a little bit and it'll all need sanding in, so I'll put the sheeting on and then those. Now, regarding the axle, I've been working on that. I've cut myself a piece of 3mm music wire, which is oversized. I've put on a washer which will go up against this 1mm ply. I've got a collet, I've got some washers, and then a piece of 3mm internal and 4mm external copper tubing. And the reason I've put that on is because the internal dimension of this, the bottom of the shock absorber, is 4mm. So rather than having it slopping around, it's held a little bit more secure. So, and then we've got another washer, and that'll all scrunch up, and then we can put the collet on. What I want to do is find some black collets that look a little bit better than this. So that now will slide into there, and as you can see, that will be held quite nice there. Now I've got a bolt with a similar arrangement, 3mm bolt on the bottom. There's another piece of brass tube in that eyelet, and that is just going to bolt through into the fuselage. Now, rather than just bolting through into this balsa and hoping it holds, which I suspect it wouldn't do, what I'm going to do is put some 1mm pieces of ply on the inside of these cheeks, so that will just glue on the inside. I'll probably epoxy those on, and that will not only provide support for the shock absorbers, it will also provide strength for when we come to do the locking mechanism for the wings, which we'll deal with in probably another video. But there, so that will just bolt through like that. So I'm going to get these glued up now, and these pieces of ply on the inside, and I'm then going to get on and do the sheeting, and then we can come back and fit the shock absorbers. Right, now I've got those ply strengtheners glued on the inside of the cheeks, I'm going to get on with the sheeting, and I'm going to do the underside first. And I said this earlier that it's 1/16 balsa, and it goes between the longerons, and hopefully you can see there these braces are set down 1/16 to allow that to occur. So I'm just going to simply put this on the balsa. I'm going to draw around using the longerons, cut it out generously, and then I'll probably just sand it to get that nice precise tight fit. So I'm going to do that first, and then I've got some 1/16 balsa here. I've got two pieces for the laminated front sheeting here, and I think what I'm going to do, I've actually, because the grain needs to go that way, I've joined, just CA'd two bits of timber together, and I'm going to do one piece first, and I'll probably CA that into place, I think, and just go along and CA it as I hold it and smooth it round. Once that's in place, I'll trim it to size, and then I will probably PVA or aliphatic resin on that, and then put the second piece on top and hold that in place with bands or maybe some clamps. I'll have a look and see how that looks. So I'll get on and do this now, and then we'll have a look when it's done. I thought I'd do a quick update. I've cut and glued in place the sheeting on the underside, and that fits really nicely. I've also CA'd this sheeting on the front on this curved section, and that's gone really nice. I just held it and CA'd it as I went. I've now got the second piece, the lamination, which forms the lamination, to go on, and I thought I'd just show you how I'm going to hold that. Well, I've got these two clamps, not too tight but firm enough, and I'm putting on some elastic bands on a piece of dowel. I'm going to place that behind the clamps like that. I'm then going to put PVA onto this this second piece of balsa, both 1/16 pieces of balsa. I'm then going to put it in place. I will pin it in place, and then I will bring the elastic bands over and round to the underside, and I will put a piece of dowel through there, and there we go, and that will hold that in place. Right, I've now got this glued, and you can see all of the elastic bands in place, nicely holding that tight around that radius. And it's the end of the day, so what better, we'll leave it overnight, we'll take the bands off tomorrow and clean this up and have a look and see what it looks like. Well, I've now taken this lowest section of the fuselage as far as I want to for the moment. We saw earlier the sheeting on the underside, and I've now got this sheeting on the nose section nicely sanded and profiled in. I'm really pleased with how that looks, and the elastic bands seem to do a really good holding them in place, holding it in place. And we can see the nacelle fits on there lovely, so I'm really pleased with how it's looking. Now, as far as the suspension goes, I haven't drilled the hole in here for the top of the shock absorber, and I don't want to do that until I come to the final fitment, which is fine. We've put the box in, we know how we're going to do the axle, we know how we're going to do the shock absorbers, but really, and we've got the strengthening in there, but really we need to wait until we know how heavy this is going to be and the impact that weight will have on these shock absorbers before we start drilling holes to mount them. And it might be that these shock absorbers aren't actually strong enough once we get the engine in and everything, and we either need to buy some better shock absorbers which might be a different length, or what I quite like the idea of is doubling them up. So much better now to wait a little bit and get the rest of this finished and then come back to this axle. But we have got the channeling and the strengtheners, so it's all set up there ready now for that axle. One thing I did think I might do is where we've got the thinner wire, just to make it look a little bit more chunky, so it kind of, you know, to fit in with the bigger wheels and the shock absorber, I thought I might put a little bit of carbon fibre tubing over the axle, just to thicken it up. It won't add any weight, but like I say, it'll just make it look a little bit better. Now, I'm not sure about the wheels. I'm playing around with different wheels at the moment. These might be a little bit too heavy, but I'm not really sure. I'm going to see what else there is on the market. I'll probably end up using those in the end. Now, I'm going to draw this video to a close now, and in the next video we need to be looking at fitting the wings onto the fuselage, into the nacelle into the wings, and how that fits onto the fuselage. Like I said earlier, we've got the strengtheners there ready, so we can do the locking mechanism to actually attach the wings and the nacelle. And once we've done that, we can hold the wings onto the fuselage and start to build up the turtle deck, because we need to have the wings fitted before we touch this turtle deck. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video, hope you found it useful, and come back and see how we get on in building this lovely 40-inch Speedy Bee. It's a really interesting build. It's unlike anything I've ever built before. It's just the detail in it, and I'm really enjoying it, and I hope you are too.